I found the loveliest quote about gratitude by the Benedictine monk David Snidel Rast. He says, "It is not joy that makes us grateful, it is gratitude that makes us joyful." And I think he's onto something because I walk around with gratitude attitude most of the time because I have so much in my life that I'm grateful for, including you. I am so appreciative of you joining me on my bookish adventures, and I'm also grateful for all the wonderful books that I finished reading in the month of November. Both being here and reading those books bring me lots of joy, and I can't wait to share everything I read in the month of November with you. Hi, I'm Kat. Welcome back to Kat's Novel Adventures. Okay, I participated in 3 readathons or challenges in the month of November. The first one was the Montgomery Challenge, hosted by Mitzi at Mitzi Reads and Writes and Elizabeth at Lizzie Faye Loves Books. The challenge ran from September through November. I read 1 book in September, which was Anne of Avonlea, nothing in October, and finished it up in November. The second readathon was the Nostalgic November, which was hosted by Kelsey over at Slime and Slashers, and it was only for the month of November. And then the final challenge is the book challenge that is hosted by my friend Melissa, who is challenging her 7th graders at Holy Ghost Catholic School. And that one runs from October through December, around like middle of October through December 12th. So it's still going on and I'm still participating in it, but I did read quite a few books or satisfy quite a few prompts in the month of November. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the books for the month of November in the order from my least favorite to most favorite, and then explain where they fit in each of the readathons or challenges, what prompts they fulfilled. So the first book is Anne of Manhattan by Brina Starla. It's a 3-star for me, and that's only because I think Brina Starla is a pretty good storyteller. It's my least favorite because it's a retelling of Anne of Green Gables, and I love Anne Shirley, and I love the setting of Anne of Green Gables and the time period, and I just couldn't see her in this modern retelling. This satisfied the prompt of a retelling or anything related, and while this is a love story, it's more modern. I don't really care for modern romances. And some of the things that Anne Shirley does in this novel are just, I just can't see it. I just didn't like it. So I gave it 3 stars because I think that if people who love modern romance and love a good love story, and all the drama that goes along with it, and have not read Anne of Green Gables, I think, you may prefer to read a book like this, but it wasn't my favorite. The second book that is a 3-star is Maud. This is The Life of L.M. Montgomery, and this is by Harry Bruce. This is for the Montgomery Challenge. It was for nonfiction or biographical. It is a middle school read about Lucy Maud Montgomery's life. Now, I think it was a good introduction to Ellen Montgomery's life. It's mainly about her early years in through the time she's in college and the beginning of her writing career, and then it talks a little bit about when she got married and had children. But I would love to read more of an adult version of the biography of her life, just because with middle school, which I like middle school books, You just can't go into a lot of detail about certain topics. So I think there were some things that were kind of glossed over only because of the audience that Harry Bruce was writing for. But it was a 3-star. It was a great introduction to her life. And I learned quite a few things about her, and I can see just from reading some of her stories how her life influenced some of the things she writes about in her stories. The next book is Only the Brave, and this is by Paul Evan Luman. And it's a Gunsmoke Western, and I chose this book for Melissa's book challenge because I needed to read a book. In a genre that I haven't read, and I don't remember really reading something that would be a true Western. So I chose this. I found this at the library, Friends of the Library sale, and I got it for $1. So I figured if I don't like it, I can always donate it back. But it actually turned out to be a fun read. I gave it 4 stars because it just had a lot of fun elements in it. There were shootouts, there's a mystery, there is a little romance, but it's not, over the top. I love the language, I love the dialogue between the characters. And then for the main character, Jeff Tyler, I envisioned the character Eugene Porter from The Walking Dead speaking those lines, which I thought was pretty funny because he would say in The Walking Dead a lot of, darling or Haas, and that's what it kind of reminded me of because that's kind of some of the language that is in this book. But this satisfied the genre prompt for Melissa's challenge, and it also satisfied Kelsey's prompt for Nostalgia November because she had a prompt that was old tech on the cover or in the story. And this has lots of old tech because there are no vehicles, there's no computers, you have horses that get them wherever they need to go, and they also are using pen and paper for everything. So I thought that would fit well for that one. Also, I should mention that Maud satisfied a prompt on Melissa's book challenge. It was to read for an appointment or at an appointment, and I happened to read about 15 minutes of this when I went to go get my mammogram. So that satisfied that prompt. Okay, next up, another 4-star, and that was Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman, my first book by Alice Hoffman. And this has a little bit of romance in it. There is some over-the-top parts in it, and it has that insta-love, love at first sight kind of thing going on. And but it was enjoyable. I had seen the movie many years ago and loved it. And don't really remember a lot of the details about it, but what I do remember is that Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman played the 2 women, and that's who I thought about when I was reading the book, which was fine. I mean, it didn't change anything because of how they were portrayed in the movie, but I enjoyed it. Like I said, really the only thing that kind of took away was a lot of that, too much of that romance part of it. But otherwise, it was a great story. This satisfied the prompt for Kelsey's, where you had witches or magical elements, and this was also the book club choice for my book club that I run with Kelsey called Chills, Thrills, and Kills, and we'll actually be discussing that soon. Next up is Nothing But Black and Teeth. This is a 4-star read for me. I enjoyed it. it satisfies two prompts. The first prompt is for Melissa's challenge, something with the cover. Let's see what she has. Read a book just because it has an amazing cover. Well, that's an amazing cover. I'm not going to lie. I love this cover. Every time I would see this book somewhere, I mean, I was like, I want to read this book just because it has this fabulous cover. And it's not a very big book to begin with. But this also satisfies a prompt for Kelsey, which is female author or woman protagonist, which is both. Okay? This is by Cassandra Kaw. First book I've read by her. It's a ghost story. It takes place in a hotel that has some history. And some people decide to spend the night there because a guy and a girl decide it might be fun to get married in this haunted place. It's really more of the bride's idea to do this. But anyway, all kinds of things happen in it. They have yokai in it, which is like part of the mythology. And come to find out, yokai, I'm a little familiar with that because my son Andrew used to watch a show called Yokai Watch, and I watched a couple of episodes with him. But this got me intrigued to where I'd like to find out some more about that kind of mythology. The only thing I'd have to say about it, and the reason I gave it 4 stars, is because it kind of ended abruptly, and I wanted a little more substance. I'd like to have had a little more backstory into the characters, and also just have a little more time in the house, or the hotel rather. But otherwise, I enjoyed it. It had really great gothic horror vibes and creepiness, and like I said, just the description of this beautiful female was kind of eerie. But anyway, liked it. Next up, Kilmeny of the Orchard. And I have to say, I was surprised by this one. It is a 4-star for me, and only because it was a little over the top, and some of the dialogue is just kind of silly. And it has that insta-love, love at first sight. But this was a little bit different as far as the respectfulness of the romance. Much more my speed than Anne of Manhattan. This is by Ellen Montgomery, and this was for my prompt, a standalone novel written by Ellen Montgomery. And I really did enjoy it. You know, it's basically about a young man who completes college, and he decides to take a friend's position at a school. His friend gets ill, and he takes the position to finish out the term. One of the evenings, he happens to be walking in an old abandoned orchard, and he comes across Kilmeny, and he instantly falls in love. The only catch is she can't speak. And so they develop a relationship, even though she has this issue, and it's just very sweet, very charming. I just wish Ellen Montgomery would have written a sequel, because I want to know what happened with Eric Marshall's life when this book ended. Next up is The Dead Zone. Okay, this is by Stephen King. I read this book for a couple of reasons. The first one is Kelsey and I are doing a project called Year of King, and this is our November read for that project. We actually will be discussing it on Sunday at noon. So if you want to join us and listen to us discuss the book, as well as the movie adaptation and the first episode of the TV show, please join us. It's live. Just be warned that we will be talking spoilers. But this book also satisfied a prompt on Kelsey's Nostalgic November board. And that was a mood read, retro or vintage. This book was published in 1979, So it fulfills that prompt because it was supposed to be anything from 2000 and prior to 2000. So it satisfies that. I like The Dead Zone. It's a 4-star for me, only because it's not the fastest paced. It's a slow burn. It's not really what I would consider a horror story. It's more or less a story where characters experience horrific situations or circumstances. It kind of reminds me of along the lines of Cujo, but I think the topics, some of the topics, it's kind of political heavy. There are like little stories that are running through because basically Johnny Smith ends up having the ability of second sight or clairvoyance, and they think it's because he had an accident when he was a little boy. He fell on the ice and conked his head, had a concussion basically, and then later as an adult he has a car accident that puts him in a coma for about 5 years. So his life is changed dramatically, but he has this ability now, and so he kind of can see when things are going to go awry. There's a storyline with a serial killer. There's also a storyline with a political candidate, Greg Stilson. So I don't know. It just, I loved it as far as like the story itself. I love the character of Johnny Smith. The character development is fabulous. The two villains in it are wonderfully written. I mean, as much as I love Johnny Smith is as much as I hate or despise Greg Stilson. But anyway, I just think it's it's a slow burn with a lot of peaks and valleys. So this is actually a reread for me, and it's a good time, but it's, probably not my favorite Stephen King. It probably wouldn't even be in my top 10, but it is worth a read if you are one that would like to read all of his books. Next up is my first 5-star read, and that is Emily of New Moon. This is by L.M. Montgomery. This is a junior adaptation that was adapted by Priscilla Galloway. When I ordered this from Thrift Books, I did not realize that it was an abridged version of the story, but it was still enjoyable, and it introduced me to a new character, which is Emily. It's basically about a young girl who, her mother died when she was young, and she was living with her father and the housekeeper, and the father becomes ill and passes away. And so her mom's family is going to take her in, but they have to decide which of the family members wants to do that. And it ends up coming to a drawing straws for them to decide. And she ends up moving in with 2 aunts and a cousin at New Moon, which is a farm. So it's about her ups and downs, navigating a new life with her new family. And very enjoyable. I love the character of Emily just as much as I love Anne, and look forward to reading more stories. This is actually from a trilogy, and it satisfied the prompt to read from a duology or a trilogy for the Moore Montgomery Challenge, and then it also fulfilled to read from a series for the book challenge from Melissa. Next up is Among the Shadows. This is 19 Tales from the Darker Side. And basically, these are short stories by L.M. Montgomery that have to do somewhat with ghosts and somewhat with people choosing to do, the wrong thing. But there's a lot of redemption in a lot of these stories, and they are enjoyable. This fulfilled the prompt for the Moore Montgomery Challenge of the short story collection, and it also fulfilled the prompt to reread or rewatch a favorite. So I reread The Deacon's Painkiller, which was a cute story. It was a story about a man named Andrew who is very set in his ways. and he does not want his daughter Amy to marry Dr. Frank Boyd, because at one time, and only one time, Frank went out with a bunch of guys for a celebration and he got drunk. And Andrew is convinced that if you get drunk once, it could happen again. And Frank also has a father that passed away from alcoholism. So he just does not trust that Frank is going to be the right choice for his Amy. Well, as the story progresses, some fun things happen and it all works out in the end. But let's just say Andrew has to learn to be flexible. Also, this book satisfied the prompt to read a book outside for 15 minutes, and I chose the last story because it was at the end of the book, called White Magic, and this is for Melissa's book challenge. And White Magic was another enjoyable story. It was basically about two young girls, Avery and Janet, and Avery is going to be married to a guy named Randall, but she really doesn't love him, and Janet can't understand why because he's such a great guy. So she decides she's going to visit Granny Thomas, who's believed to be a witch, and get a love potion for Avery. Well, as we know, things don't always work out the way you plan them to, and both Avery and Janet, as well as Randall, all get a huge surprise by the end of the story. So I just would say, if you haven't read anything by L.M. Montgomery, you might want to pick up these stories. I'd recommend kind of, spacing them out, because one thing I have discovered about L.M. Montgomery is a lot of her themes that run through all of her books and stories, some of them are very similar, and I think it's because of her own experiences. Not that that's bad or anything. I think it's great. It's just that when you can pick a story up, here or there, it doesn't seem like you're reading one big story about the same thing. So this book actually finished everything I've done so far for the book challenge. The Dead Zone fulfilled everything on Nostalgic November, and that was everything for the More Montgomery Challenge as far as books. I did have two screen adaptations or TV series that I needed to watch. And one of them was to watch any non-Anne adaptation. So I watched an episode of Road to Avonlea from season 1. It was on Gazebo. They allowed you to stream certain episodes, and I happened to watch episode 4, which what was nice was it had the characters of Marilla and Rachel in it, different characters as well, but those two from the Anne of Green Gables series. Anne wasn't in it, but these other two ladies were. And so it was very enjoyable. I have to figure out a way to be able to watch the rest of the series and start at the beginning, because I really, really enjoyed it a lot. And then the other was to watch any Anne adaptation, and I chose Anne of Green Gables, which was from 2016. It was a PBS masterpiece. Martin Sheen plays Matthew in the Anne of Green Gables adaptation. It was so enjoyable. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought the young actress that played Anne was super sweet and charming. Apparently there's a couple of more adaptations of it, which eventually I'll have to get around to watching as well. Now, my last book had nothing to do with any of the challenges or readathons. It is a book that my sister and I decided to buddy read together. So we spent 10 evenings on Zoom, because she lives in Atlanta, Georgia. So we spent 10 evenings on Zoom discussing each chapter of the book. It's about spirituality, it's about awakening, it's about learning more about the ego, about becoming more aware, dealing with your pain body, and trying to be more present in the present moment, because that's really all we have is the present moment. So we started in August, and it ended in November. And that book that we read is called A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. I love this book. This is actually my third time reading it. Every time I read it, I get something else out of it. It reminds me about things. Sometimes, we start to change or, develop a new habit, and then something else will happen in your life and it falls by the wayside, and we forget that some of those new things we wanted to do benefit our lives. And so I was so glad that I picked this up again, because it really did help me it really kind of pushed me to even start my YouTube channel, or not so much to start it, but to film my first video, because I was having a little anxiety and a little fear surrounding it, like, thinking I wasn't going to be able to do it, or how am I going to edit it, all these, questions that come in your mind. Well, that's all ego. That's the ego trying to prevent you from, doing things in your life, basically. So I'm so glad that I reread it. It was her first time reading it, but I'm glad we did it together, because it also gave us an opportunity to do something together, to catch up with one another. And we're actually going to read another book at the first of the year, once the first of the year starts. I think we're going to pick up in January. So anyway, anybody who's interested in spirituality, learning more about the ego, and learning to be more present, I would highly recommend A New Earth. It was my favorite book that I read in November, or finished rather, in November. So what did you read in November? Please leave me a comment of what your favorite books were in November. Or did you read any of the books that I read? Or did you participate in any of the challenges that I participated in? I'd love to know. And even if you just want to stop by and say hello, that's perfectly fine as well. I love chatting with y'all in the comments. So basically all I have left is to finish up the book challenge. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to complete all of Kelsey's prompts for Nostalgic November. I did 4 of them, and I'm pretty proud of that. And I did get Blackout for the More Montgomery Challenge, and that was pretty exciting. I actually won a prize at the giveaway, and I should be receiving 2 more Ellen Montgomery books for my collection, so that's pretty exciting. But as far as for Melissa's challenge, I have 3 prompts left. One of them is to read a book suggested by Mrs. Morrison, and I'm reading Dorothy Must Die. That's what she recommended. And then 2 of the prompts, read a book that has a mystery to solve, and read a book a classmate suggested. I'm actually going to double dip on that one, and I'm reading Agatha Christie's Crooked House. And this was recommended to me by my friend Amy Teville. And I'm super excited. I'm enjoying both the Dorothy book as well as Crooked House, and can't wait to share my thoughts on both of them with you in the future. So that's all I have for right now. So in the meantime, you know what you can do. Stay amazing and be adventurous.